Hello everyone, I'm excited to say that today we are actually going to bring video into Final Cut X. So it's starting to get interesting. Now I know that there's a lot of dull stuff that you have to get through before it gets fun, but trust me, it does get fun eventually. It's important to get that background information in, otherwise it doesn't get fun. It gets to be a nightmare, and it's still pretty difficult even with the background information. But at any rate, today we're going to be talking about importing media, and we're going to start from scratch. So we're starting up Final Cut with nothing open, and we'll talk a little bit about the sort of file structures of Final Cut X. So first of all, the first thing we have to do here in Final Cut is to create a library. That is the highest level of structure within Final Cut. And this is not a little thing that you're doing here. This is something that you have to think about and have kind of a plan for. So first of all, we have to give the Final Cut designers a little bit of slack because it is hard to come up with icons these days to relate to things that haven't really existed before or are not relevant before or anymore. So a lot of editors are, going with icons from the old film industry or icons from the video editing world. Well, we're in that, but like the video tape editing world. And so Avid has, or Final Cut has made a bold move and just made stars. They don't know what to come up with for pictures anymore or icons. So yeah, so the 4 stars means that this is a library, and what library means is this is where all of your assets are going to be stored. And so what I mean by you shouldn't deal with this lightly is that you're going to desperately need to find this thing again when you open up Final Cut Pro later. You're going to want to keep these things organized. You're going to want to put this on ideally a very fast external drive with a lot of space would be the perfect place for it. I have a very large external drive, but it's not terribly fast, but that's what we're going to be working with today. Or you can put it on your computer, but just be aware that video takes up a ton of space. And so if you're doing a project of any serious size, it's going to eat up space pretty bad. So that's the library. The library is where everything that you import into Final Cut and all of your projects and your events and all this other stuff is going to go. So I've already made one called DVE library, but so this is where you do it. Type it in and say DVE library, but I'm going to hit cancel and also show you how to open a library. And here are my recent ones, which is kind of handy. So we'll open up DVE library. And so this is empty, nothing in it. All I've done is gone file, new library, and I made this. And so, in the world of other editors, we might refer to the library as the project because, as the book suggests, and I would agree, typically you would start a new library for each individual project. Now, if you have an ongoing project, like, I don't know, a YouTube series or TV series or something where you're going to be using a lot of the same, pulling from the same pool of footage, then you might want to put that all in one library. That's probably a good way to go. And then organize it in folders or in events or both. And but if you're working on totally different videos, let's say you're making videos for a client and you have 2 totally different clients and none of their footage overlaps, then it really would be a good idea to have individual libraries for those 2 different projects. It just helps keep things better organized. And let's say if you're finished with the project, you're not going to be using any of that footage ever again. In theory, you could just take that library and trash it, but you could also easily archive that project by moving that library somewhere else. So keeping things split up just makes your data management easier down the road. So that's our library. Library automatically comes with one event based on the date. So we're giving away a little bit here what day I'm working on this, but it is August 15th. And then you can click on that and change the name of that event if you like. And then you have folders too, and you can create folders within events and organize your footage in a number of different ways. But just basically speaking, we have our library, we have events, we have folders, and then we have projects to and individual clips. And so you saw me working with a project a little bit before, but right now we got to get some media in. And Final Cut knows that you probably want to do this. So here we have an empty event that I've selected here, and in the associated window, it's saying you want to import media. It's assuming that's probably one of the first things you want to do. So you can click there. It's also down here, so if once you've imported stuff, you're going to lose that arrow. So in the future, if you've already got things in an event, it's good to know that this is where you can import into Final Cut X. And where stuff goes when we import is going to depend on how we have things set up here, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. So on the left here, we have a bunch of different options. We could actually import right from the built-in camera, or I have a hard drive connected for a documentary I'm working on about buying a DeLorean and driving it up to Alaska, which I did in June of 2017. So this is all sorts of footage from my drive up from Alaska in the DeLorean, and I'm going to make a feature-length documentary about that. So we have some good footage to play with here. So I can select that, but I could also select, my hard drive, my desktop, or if you had a SD card attached to your computer, which is a common way to get footage in, that would pop up here, and you could also select footage from that. So most of my footage that I want to work with is on DeLorean, so I select that, and now I have looking at the entire DeLorean project here and all the different folders I've created and whatnot. And so one that I've got open here is some drone footage that we shot of the DeLorean back in Michigan before I left. And so I can select that, and I can simply select a clip and hit import. If I really don't want to think about anything, I can do that. Also, this is a little bit scary. Let's see if I can get this to work here. Yeah, if you just select the drive if you don't click on anything, you can select import all, which would be lunacy, because this is hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes of data right now. So I definitely do not want to import all of that. But the idea of this is that if you had an SD card with some recently acquired footage and you want it all, or you don't have time to sort through it, you could click on that SD card, select import all, and it would just bring everything in from that SD card, and you would be good to go. So that's a good quick way to bring stuff into Final Cut X if you just want to get everything. You don't want to go picking through footage. But I got too much to do that, so I'm going to go picking through. So once I select a clip, I can then sort of scroll through here, and through audio scrubbing I can see, isn't that a beautiful car? Come on, tell me that's not gorgeous. Alright, it's not everybody's taste, but it's mine. So here we'll play a little bit. Unfortunately, this is a pretty slow drive, so you're seeing the misery that I'm living in right now. I hope to get a faster drive so I can do more practical editing here. But this is one of the things that you'll see if you're trying to play back video off a drive that is not quite up to speed, literally. So it's a little bit hard to play that back. I hope that you're in a better situation than me, and hopefully I'll get a much faster drive here shortly. But in the meantime, this is what I got. So I can go through, I can either individually select clips, or I can hold the command button and select clips like so, or I can hold shift and it will select everything between two. If you're not familiar with the different options of clicking on a Mac, but shift will select everything between the original selected item and the item you click on, and then command lets you just click on whatever you want, and you can actually click to deselect things too if you want. So you can go through, pick out the clips that you want, hit import selected. When you are importing from an SD card, you have one other cool thing, which unfortunately doesn't work if this footage is already on a regular hard drive. It has to identify it as like footage from a camera, I believe. But then you can actually import just one section. You don't have to take the full clip. You can say, I only want this part of the clip. But I can't do that. If you go to Mark, Set Range, Start, the shortcut is I and O for in and out. And because this clip is not coming off an SD card, it's not letting me do that. Just gives me an error when I try and do that. Or you can grab the ends and drag them in. That is a luxury for clips just coming in, I believe, just on an SD card, or if you have a camera, particular camera attached to your computer that the software recognizes, you can pull things off and you should be able to select just parts of a clip that way. But can't do it with these, so I'm going to have to grab the whole clips. So let's say I like that one. Now, whole bunch of weird settings over here, things to think about. Do I want to add to an existing event, or do I want to create a new event? And so when you're just starting off, that's fairly simple. But as you're maybe adding footage to your project, it could be that you want to add it to different events. And really, I don't like the term event. That's kind of irritating. In Avid, we'd call it just a bin. It's just it's just a section. It doesn't have to be an event. It doesn't have to be like birthday party or Christmas or something like that. Your event could be just drone footage or something, and it could come from all sorts of different times and places. But event is the term that they came up with, so don't get confused about that. Event can be anything, and we could create a new event and just call this drone footage, or just drone. I hit return, so it's importing. But let's bring that open again so we can have another quick look at some of the other settings. You might recall in our first video we talked about copy to library or leave files in place. This is the part of editing where you're going to notice a difference between these two. So copy to library means it's going to take it off of the drive, in this case the DeLorean drive, and copy it on to the library folder, which also happens to be on the DeLorean drive. So it's basically making a duplication when I hit copy to library. Nice thing about that is if I leave copy to library on for everything I do in this project, everything for the project will be nice and tidy and organized in that library folder. Final Cut will know where to find it. You don't have to worry about stuff so bad. If I leave files in place, then all Final Cut will do is sort of put a little post-it note in the library that says, hey, you can find this in DeLorean, in this particular folder. And if I go around and move that or delete it or whatever, Final Cut won't know where it's at. So there are risks to this. Copy to library and costs and benefits. So copy to library is great. It's going to take longer because it's going to have to make a copy of that data, and now you're going to have that data space to deal with. If data costs nothing, didn't take any time, and we had unlimited space, in some world maybe that would be the case, then I'd copy everything in the library. But because of the time and the additional hassle of taking up hard drive space, that's why you might want to consider leaving files in place. Problem is then the organization of your files is on you, and you can't go in and monkey around with stuff in your folders later. It can throw off Final Cut. You'll lose things. It's a bad idea. We talked about creating optimized media, create proxy media. We're going to turn that off for now, but we kind of talked about those already. If you have any questions, let me know. Keywords we kind of talked about a little bit already. Rest of this stuff is fine. You could turn off close window after starting import if you want to start importing some things while going around and looking at other things. But at any rate, that's the basic idea. Go to the hard drive with the stuff on it that you want, locate it, select as much of it as you want, adjust your settings the way you feel you need, and hit import. And that's it. And so here's my clip. You can see here 25%. This is showing the background task, as it says in my little pop-up window. And this is showing the progress of that import. So we are only about a quarter of the way through importing it. Now I can go through and look at things, and play it back in the poor quality that I'm struggling with at the moment. And thank you for bearing with me. Hope to have this clipping along a little bit better later. And then I can bring it into my project, do all that. We'll be talking about that stuff a little bit later. But that's how it is. Fairly simple. when it works. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you have some issues, or maybe you have files that Final Cut doesn't recognize, doesn't want to import. You could definitely have issues with that. Files grayed out because it's not a format that Final Cut recognizes. But it basically copying or importing footage into Final Cut is fairly simple. I want to talk one little bit about codecs because they talk a bit about it in the text, but they don't really define it. Codec stands for coder decoder, basically, and what it is it's the way that it's the format in which files are saved. So you've probably heard of QuickTime movies, maybe you've heard of JPEGs or GIFs, that sort of stuff. These are all different ways of encoding a file, and then you have to be able to decode it too. And so Final Cut can decode a variety of footage that you might bring to it. You can see here it is not decoding a .xlsx file, because if you're familiar with that, that is an Excel file, and it's unlikely that you could do much editing, video editing with an Excel file. But other things like these .movs, QuickTime movies, it's fine with. So codec is basically, it's a type of file, and there are certain file formats that work better for video, not as good. There are certain file formats that Final Cut likes better than others. There are some it won't take at all, that kind of thing. It can take a lot of stuff though, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about codecs, what that's all about. And I know it's a little bit of a computer sciencey type term, but I know it's irritating too when you see terms thrown around and they're not really defined. So that's a codec. And one of the things that we think about when we're editing is what is the best codec to shoot in, and then what is our software going to like the best, so it's going to play back smoothly, and when we output it, what is YouTube going to want to have in terms of a codec, that kind of stuff. So this, unfortunately, is there's a downside to the computer revolution in editing, and it has complicated lives a lot. It's made editing a lot faster and easier and more forgiving in some ways, but it's also made life somewhat miserable in other ways too. So try not to get thrown off by the terms, and if you got questions about terms, let me know. But look at that. We got footage into Final Cut X. Isn't that exciting? What we do with it, I don't know, but it's in there. And now you can start playing around with it. Let me know if you have any questions. That is the basics of importing.